Today, we're diving into a powerful journey of transformation, a story about how focusing on yourself and embracing silence can completely change your life. Over the next 10 parts, you'll see how quiet strength unfolds, how silence becomes power, and how everything truly falls into place when you stop chasing validation and start protecting your peace, the perfect life that isn't. On the surface, Ava's life gleamed with the polish of quiet envy. Her mornings started with green smoothies and perfectly filtered Instagram posts captioned with vague positivity. Grind now, glow later. Her colleagues admired her discipline, her friends praised her ambition. Even her family boasted about how put together she seemed. But inside, Ava was unraveling. Her days felt like walking on a treadmill set just a notch too fast. Work deadlines blurred into late-night emails. Dinners became silent scrolls through other people's highlight reels. Conversations grew hollow, small talk about weekend plans, fake laughs at jokes that barely landed. Ava had mastered the art of nodding while her mind quietly screamed, "Does any of this matter?" Every achievement brought applause, none brought peace. In the mirror, she saw someone who looked like she had it all together, flawless makeup, curated outfits, polite smiles. But behind that reflection was exhaustion, not just physical, but spiritual, a weariness from living for validation, from performing happiness while feeling hollow. Then, it happened, not during a crisis, not during heartbreak, but on an ordinary Wednesday, over coffee with acquaintances she barely liked, laughing at a story she didn't care about. Her chest tightened, breath shortened, vision narrowed. A wave of something, panic, maybe, crashed over her so fast she excused herself mid-conversation. In the bathroom mirror, her hands trembled. Her throat tightened around words she couldn't say. What am I even doing? For the first time in years, Ava looked herself in the eye without the performance. And what she saw wasn't strength, it was fear. Fear that she'd built an entire life around being what others wanted. And none of it felt real anymore. Something had to change. But she didn't know what, not yet. The quote that starts a war, nights had become Ava's enemy. It wasn't the darkness or the silence itself. It was what surfaced in the quiet. Alone in her apartment, phone screen glowing in the dark, she scrolled through post after post, people sharing wins, sharing heartbreak, sharing opinions like confetti. Noise everywhere, noise she used to participate in. Her thumb hovered over a quote. Stark white text against a black square, "Stop telling people what you're going to do. Just do it." Mel Robbins. Something inside her broke open. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was a raw exhaustion that finally found its words. She realized how much energy she wasted narrating her every step to people who didn't really care, seeking approval from an invisible crowd who never seemed satisfied. Without thinking, she deleted the apps, Instagram, Facebook, even WhatsApp. Silence fell, heavy and strange. It felt like cutting a lifeline and floating into unknown waters. She turned her phone face down. No more explanations, no more updates. No more performance. Days passed, texts stacked up. "Where are you? You okay? Why aren't you posting?" She ignored them all. She wasn't ready to explain something she didn't fully understand herself. But not everyone would let her go quietly. Her closest friend, Leela, the one who knew Ava's every secret, every insecurity, showed up unannounced. Wine in hand, accusations barely masked as concern. "You think you're better than everyone now. Just because you're suddenly too zen to share your life like the rest of us." Ava's silence was her answer. Leela hated silence. She mistook it for judgment. "You know what, Ava, you've always needed attention. Now you're just pretending you don't. Call me when you're done with this." Whatever this is, the door slammed, the friendship cracked. Alone again, Ava realized something profound. Silence reveals who respects you, and who only liked the version of you that needed them. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't a breakdown at all. It was the first, shaky step towards something stronger. The loneliness of silence. Silence sounded peaceful in theory. In practice, it was suffocating. Ava hadn't expected how loud the quiet would feel. Without the constant buzz of notifications, updates, and meaningless chatter, time seemed to stretch unnaturally long. Evenings became unbearable. She'd sit with a book open, rereading the same paragraph without absorbing a single word. Music seemed too intrusive. Podcasts reminded her of conversations she wasn't having. The ache wasn't just loneliness. It was withdrawal, from validation, from attention, from the feeling of being seen. She found herself reaching for her phone out of muscle memory, only to remember there were no updates waiting. No likes. No comments. No one asking her what she thought or what she was doing. Her absence was met with silence, and that silence mirrored something terrifying. No one notices when you disappear if you were only there to entertain them. Gout gnawed at her. Was this growth? Or was she slipping into irrelevance? Had she misunderstood everything? Old habits called out to her like old lovers. Send a text. Post a quote. Share a selfie. Let them know you're still here. Let them tell you you're still enough. But something stopped her. Pride, fear. Or maybe a small, growing whisper inside her that said, not this time. One night, restless and tired of staring at walls, she opened her laptop. Not social media. A blank document. Her fingers hovered over the keys, unsure at first what to say. Then, slowly, words began to pour out. Not polished words for public consumption. Not pretty captions for approval. Just thoughts. Messy. Honest. Unapologetic. Memories. Regrets. Things she'd never dared to admit aloud. It wasn't art. It wasn't profound. But it was hers. By the time the sun began to rise, Eva realized something she hadn't expected to feel again. Peace. Not the peace of being praised or followed. The peace of creating something without permission. When you stop explaining, they start watching. Days turned into weeks. Eva didn't return to the apps. She didn't call to catch up. She didn't offer explanations to those who wondered. And something strange began to happen. At work, the energy shifted. Where people once interrupted her, now they paused to listen. In meetings, her quiet confidence held more weight than her previous eagerness ever had. Even her boss, a woman who had once overlooked Eva's contributions, seemed to notice. You've been focused lately, she remarked. It wasn't quite a compliment, but it wasn't criticism either. More like curiosity. Outside of work, the shifts were more unsettling. Friends who hadn't checked in during her silence began lurking on her old posts. Likes from people she hadn't spoken to in years appeared on photos she'd long forgotten. DMs came in vague, probing. Are you okay? You've gone so quiet. Miss seeing your updates. You're being kind of mysterious lately. Everything good? There was an irony Eva couldn't ignore. The attention she used to chase was now finding her in the void she'd left behind. Not because she was performing. Because she wasn't. Silence had made her. Interesting, unpredictable, powerful. At first, this realization felt strange. Unfair, even. Why had she wasted so many years trying to be louder, clearer, more present, when disappearing had drawn more eyes than her constant striving ever had? One afternoon, an email landed in her inbox. A promotion opportunity. A project she thought had slipped through her fingers weeks ago. The offer came without fanfare, without begging, without her having to remind anyone she existed. It simply arrived, quietly, like all good things seem to, when you stop forcing them. Eva sat with the offer open on her screen. No one knew yet. No one needed to. For the first time, success felt like something she could claim for herself, without applause, without permission, without performance. And somewhere in the quiet, she realized, when you stop explaining yourself, people stop underestimating you. They start watching, carefully, silently, but this time, she wasn't performing for them. She was moving for herself, the betrayal hidden in plain sight. Even in silence, trust is a fragile thing. Eva had come to cherish the rare moments she still shared with Lila, the friend who had once been her closest ally before their fallout. After weeks of cold distance, they met in a quiet cafe, the kind with soft jazz and dim lighting, where conversations could float under the radar. Eva hesitated but allowed herself to open up. She shared a thought, not a secret exactly, but something personal, a whisper of vulnerability that she hadn't told anyone else. It felt safe, like a thread of connection in the quiet she'd woven around herself. Weeks later, that thread snapped. She learned through whispers and half-truths that her words, her guarded confessions, had been twisted and shared without her consent. What was meant to be private was now fodder for gossip, distorted into something she barely recognized. Eva felt the weight of the betrayal like a sudden chill on bare skin. The silence she thought protected her was breached, her safe space invaded. She confronted Lila, hoping for an explanation, for remorse. But the look in her old friend's eyes wasn't regret, it was envy. A bitter, sharp envy that had festered beneath the surface, growing jealous of Ava's transformation, her strength born in silence. You think your quiet makes you better than me. Leela spat, voice low but fierce. You were never the same person I knew. You changed, and not in a way I like. The words cut deeper than any argument ever had. In that moment, Ava understood, even silence needs boundaries, even silence needs armor. Not everyone deserved the quiet she offered, some would weaponize it, some would see it as weakness, or worse, as betrayal. The lesson was painful but clear. Protecting peace means choosing who gets in, and who stays out. Breaking without breaking down, the betrayal left a wound that burned long after the words were spoken. Ava felt stripped bare, exposed in a way she hadn't anticipated. Yet beneath the ache, something unexpected flickered, a fierce determination not to let the fracture define her. She retreated deeper into herself. Friends became fewer, conversations became shorter, but this time, it wasn't about hiding, it was about healing. Each night, Ava poured her pain into her journal, the ink bleeding honesty onto the pages. She wrote not for approval, but for release. She worked harder, but with a new kind of focus, not frantic, but deliberate. Every small accomplishment felt like a brick in the foundation of a stronger self. Her confidence, once fragile and wavering, began to solidify. She wasn't pretending anymore, she was becoming. And then, just when Ava thought she was alone on this path, someone entered her world quietly. He was the kind of person who noticed the silences, the pauses in conversations where most people looked away. At work, he respected her boundaries without question. He didn't push for explanations or performances. Instead, he listened, really listened. One evening, as the office emptied, he approached her desk. I've admired how you carry yourself, he said softly, eyes steady. You don't need to say much, it speaks volumes. It wasn't a grand confession or a sudden declaration. It was simple, genuine, respectful. For the first time in a long time, Ava felt seen without needing to perform. Her heart, still tender, began to heal in this unexpected connection. She realized, sometimes breaking doesn't mean falling apart. Sometimes, it means shedding the old to become unbreakable. Opportunities chase the silent. The silence Ava had once feared had transformed into a quiet magnet, pulling opportunities, people, and possibilities toward her without the exhausting chase she'd known before. Emails slid into her inbox unbidden. Invitations to collaborate on projects that aligned with her passion, offers to speak at events she never imagined attending, and messages from creative minds who sought her insight. The world Ava had once begged to be noticed by was now reaching out, drawn by the subtle strength she exuded. She learned to move differently, no longer shouting to be heard, but standing firm in her stillness, letting her work and integrity speak in her place. Yet, not all voices in her past had faded. Leela's attempt at reconciliation came wrapped in false sweetness, veiling ulterior motives. A carefully worded message, let's catch up, I want to make things right, but Ava saw through it. She knew this was no innocent gesture, it was a calculated move to tap into the network she had quietly built, to steal the momentum she had earned in silence. The temptation to respond was there, a flicker of old familiarity and unfinished stories. But Ava's silence was no longer naive. She declined, choosing instead to protect her space and the power it had given her. And as she closed that door, another one creaked open, a fresh invitation, a new path unfolding before her eyes. Ava understood, finally, that true power didn't come from noise or crowds. It came from focused stillness. Silence builds power. Power attracts everything louder than words ever could, the ultimate test of silence. Ava's world had shifted, but the past had a way of knocking on doors she thought were firmly closed. An invitation arrived, not just any opportunity, but the biggest one yet. A chance to lead a high-profile project, to step into a spotlight she'd once craved. The catch, it demanded everything she'd worked to shed. Endless networking events, rehearsed smiles, superficial conversations, and a relentless performance of perfection. The offer glittered with promise and prestige, but beneath the surface, it felt like a trap, a test. She found herself standing at the crossroads where silence met spectacle, the moment that would define if she had truly changed, or if the old Ava still held sway beneath the calm exterior. For days, the old voices echoed loudly. This is your chance. Don't throw it away. You need this to prove yourself. People expect you to show up. But deeper inside, a new voice spoke softly but firmly. You don't owe them this version of yourself anymore. When the day came to decide, Ava chose silence. She walked away. The deal fell apart without her. The spotlight dimmed. But Ava felt no regret, only relief. She had discovered something invaluable. True success wasn't measured by the noise you made or the crowds you gathered. It was measured by the peace you kept and the authenticity you preserved. Walking away wasn't failure. It was victory, the shocking realization. In the quiet aftermath of her decision, Ava found herself alone with her thoughts, no distractions, no noise, no expectations. It was in this stillness that the truth revealed itself, not as a thunderclap, but as a gentle, undeniable whisper. All the betrayals, all the silences, all the solitary steps she'd taken had led her here, to a version of herself that was uncheckable, self-trusting, and finally free. She realized that the barriers she'd once blamed on others, the disappointments, the betrayals, the loneliness, had never been the true obstacles. The real chains were her own addiction to noise, the endless need for approval, the constant performance, the desperate clinging to validation from outside. Her silence had not been a retreat, it had been a revolution. What shocked her most was who began to seek her out now, the very people who had doubted her, dismissed her, or tried to pull her back into old patterns. They came with questions, with admiration, with a hunger to learn the secret she'd found in stillness. For the first time, Ava held the power to choose, not out of fear or need, but from strength. She was no longer the girl chasing noise. She was the woman who understood that peace was the true victory, the version they didn't expect. Months had passed since Ava had last spoken publicly. Her silence had been a shield, a way to gather strength, to rebuild, to become someone new. Now, standing in front of a small crowd at a community event, Ava felt something unfamiliar, calm. No need to perform. No desire to impress, just truth. She shared her story, not the polished highlights, but the raw, unfiltered journey of breaking free from noise, betrayal, and self-doubt. Her voice was steady, her eyes bright with quiet confidence. When you focus on yourself, stay silent, and protect your peace. Life doesn't fall apart, it falls into place. The room was silent, hanging on her every word. But the true twist wasn't in her speech, it was in the audience. Among the faces, at the back of the room, sat the one person who had once tried to break her, the toxic friend who had betrayed her trust. She sat quietly, listening. No sneers, no interruptions, just silent witness. Ava saw her there and understood something profound. She no longer needed to fight the past. Her peace was uncheckable, her silence was her power. As the applause rose, Ava smiled softly. She wasn't the person the world expected her to be. She was the person she was always meant to be, and that was the greatest victory of all.